Okay, selling using analogies. I want to preface this just by saying this was probably one of the most powerful tools I ever put in my toolkit regarding sales. And there's a good reason for using analogies in your sales process, and it's this. This is why they work. People don't buy data, they buy stories and emotions. Your brain will process an analogy 60,000 times faster than it will raw data. And the reason for it is analogies make unfamiliar things familiar, which bridges the gap between confusion and clarity. So, what I mean by that is everybody's brain thinks in pictures. If I say to you, pink elephant, you don't think about the words, you think about a pink elephant, right? Your brain sees in pictures. So, if we can take sometimes difficult concepts and put them into pictures, we can help explain them much easier. If we can take objections and put them into pictures, we can handle objections much easier. So the explanation, the example I've given here is explaining a complicated data dashboard to somebody is a bit like putting them in a cockpit. They're looking around, there's all these buttons and switches, they're like, bloody hell, this thing looks horrendous. But if you were to say, yeah, I know it looks scary, but really what this is like is Google Maps for your business decisions. They will get it instantly, right? Because the analogy is they understand Google Maps. They might not understand the dashboard yet. But when you give an analogy as to what it's like, they go, all right, so I just, basically punch in where I want to go and it will give me a direct path there. The dashboard does the same thing, right? So that's one way an analogy could be used. There are three types of analogies that you'll use. Number one is explanatory. Number two is persuasive, and number three is descriptive. So if we work through these a little bit, an explanatory analogy is used to clarify a complex idea. So the example here is our data integration tool is a bit like FedEx for your digital files. It picks up, sorts, and delivers everything to the right place. Okay, so when you use an analogy, you wouldn't just say this bit. You wouldn't just say, well, let's get back to the previous one. You wouldn't just say our data integration tool is like FedEx for your files, because it's almost like there's no concept behind it. So you start with the analogy and then you finish giving an explanation. It picks up, sorts, and delivers everything to the right place. Then you've got persuasive analogies. So this is when you use an analogy to persuade somebody of something. And the reason it's effective is because it's the fastest way to be able to shift their belief and create urgency, which is important in sales. So an example is this, somebody says, yeah, maybe it's just, just not the right time to invest. Okay. We could say, well, look, delaying this decision or delaying this upgrade is kind of like ignoring a leaky pipe. You might not notice it today, but eventually it's going to cause so much damage, your ceiling's going to come down, So this is how we use persuasive analogies. And then you've got descriptive analogies, which are used to paint mental pictures that spark emotion. And again, the example is this workspace is a bit like an iPhone for your team's productivity. It's simple, elegant, and powerful. Okay, because people know, those of you that use iPhone, you like iPhone because it's easy, it's simple, it's got a nice user interface, right? So if you wanted to explain something to somebody about a workspace or a dashboard, likening it to an iPhone is going to make them go, oh, right, I get it, like an iPhone. And immediately they think, yeah, I like iPhone. It's simple, it's easy to use, right? I mean, if you, used this and they used Android, you'd be fucked. So, but it's just an example, right? So this is what I call the ANA formula, which is you've got to anchor, you've got to make it novel, and then you've got to apply it. So the anchor is you start with something they already know. So using the examples we gave before, okay, is this workspace is like an iPhone, right? You start with something they already know. Then you introduce the analogy, okay? This workspace is like an iPhone for your team's productivity. Simple, elegant, powerful. And what this does is it shows how it ties back to the product. So this Workspace is like an iPhone for your team's productivity. It's simple, elegant, and powerful, which means your team are going to be able to use it just as easily as they do their iPhone. Okay, you would tie it back to the product. So this is an example for a CRM, okay, which is a customer management software, in case you don't know what a CRM is. CRMs are things like HubSpot, Go High Level, there's one called Close, and what they are is ways to organize your customers, basically. Most business have a CRM. The anchor would be, if you're trying to sell a new CRM software to somebody, the anchor would be, do you remember how frustrating it was trying to find a phone number in a messy address book? And they're like, yeah, flicking through pages, trying to find it. The novel part is, well, our CRM is a bit like a digital assistant that organizes and reminds you before you forget. Okay, and then the application would be, so you always know who to follow up with and when. Right? So this is just one example for a CRM software. What I want you guys to do is think about crafting your own analogies, okay? The way you do this, and I'm going to give you a couple more in a second, you identify the key idea or the key benefit. Then you ask, what can I liken this to? What is it like? What is something that I can tell them that will get them to understand what it's like? And then think of comparisons from daily life, pop culture, sports, cooking, doesn't matter. And then test it. Does it simplify the idea? Does it stick? And does it spark emotion? So here's an example. It's not uncommon when you're in sales. Some of you guys and girls will know that when somebody gets on the call, sometimes they just don't want to go through your sales process. Okay, they just don't. They get on, they're like, yeah, whatever, dude, just tell me the price. How much is it? How much is it? So a good example of this is when I sold for Ryan Serhant, who is, if you don't know who he is, he's a kind of a big deal. He's got millions and millions of followers online. He is in the real estate space, very, very successful real estate agent in the US. And he's been very good at branding himself using social media, which is why he's got millions of followers. That's how he does, billions of dollars worth of real estate deals. So what he does is teach other real estate agents how to brand themselves on social media, right? And so I had this guy come on the phone one time and he said, I don't want to go through your process, mate, to be honest. He said, I just want to know like how it works and how much it costs. And I said, you know what, fair enough. The problem is we've got, a couple of different options and, I really need to understand what you're looking for before I can give you a price. And he was just pushing back. He went, yeah. Look, just give me the range. Just give me the options. So I knew I had to use an analogy. And what I did is I used one that he would understand. And I said, look, if somebody walked into your real estate office and said, how much for a house, what would you say? And he went, well, what kind of house? I went, no, I'm not answering any of your questions. Just how much for a house? And he was like, well, yeah, but it depends. And I said, yeah, I don't want to answer any of your questions. Just tell me how much for a house. And then he got it. And he went, okay, I get it. I see. I said, so just like somebody wanting a house, you need to ask a certain amount of questions to understand what they're looking for so that you can give them a price. Exactly the same here. And he got it instantly. And he went, okay, fair enough. All right, what do you need to know? And we progressed with the call. That's one idea. But what I want you guys to do is think of analogies that you can use in day-to-day life and practice using analogies. You don't have to wait until you're on a sales call before you use an analogy. Think of a couple and practice them. Practice them with family, friends, the wife. Don't do it too often with the wife because, she'll get angry like my wife does. So the summary is this. Analogies cut through confusion. They create instant clarity and they help your message land every single time. Okay? So think about a product, right? Think about a weight loss product or selling CRM database or selling coaching for real estate agents, right? Just think about any kind of an industry. And then if somebody were struggling to understand that industry, what analogy could you use for them to be able to understand it easier. And what I want you to do is I want you to think of one explanatory analogy, one persuasive analogy, and one descriptive analogy to be able to use. And then what we can do is practice these on one of the calls. Any questions, shoot me the questions in the group, and I'll see you on the next lesson.